What would you do if you accidentally woke up in your billionaire boss's bed and he refused to let you forget it? One drunken mistake, one powerful man who sees an opportunity, and one woman who swore she'd never mix business with pleasure until the line between pretending and feeling disappears completely. This is the story of Lily, a sharp but stubborn assistant, and Henry Ford, the cold, untouchable CEO who turns her world upside down after one night changes everything. Grab your coffee, settle in, and get ready. Because this isn't just a love story, it's a dangerous game of control, temptation, and the moment when fake becomes far too real. Lily had always known working for Henry Ford was like dancing on the edge of a sword. He was a man of discipline, control, and ice-cold stares that could silence a crowded boardroom. As his executive assistant, she had learned to match his pace, never faltering under his demands. But she also knew one mistake could cost her everything. The mistake came sooner than she ever imagined. It happened during a luxury business trip to a seaside resort. Henry had just closed a multi-million-dollar deal with top investors in the tech industry, and for once, there was something to celebrate. At dinner, surrounded by the city's elite, Henry surprised her by telling her to relax. She almost laughed. Henry didn't relax. Yes, not ever. But that night, the rules seemed different. Expensive wine flowed like water, and for the first time she saw him laugh, tease, and even smile like a normal human being. By the time they left the restaurant, both had drunk more than they should have. Henry excused himself and left early. Lily lingered, enjoying the sea breeze and the rare feeling of having no responsibilities. But when she finally decided to head to her room, she realized she didn't actually remember which one it was. The hallway swam before her eyes, the numbers on the doors blurring together. And then, salvation. One door stood slightly open. Without hesitation, she stumbled inside, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the bed, mumbling, "Best hotel ever," before passing out. Morning sunlight filtered in through the curtains. Something moved beside her. At first, she thought it was a dream. Then her brain screamed, "My pillow is breathing." Her eyes flew open. It wasn't a pillow. It was Henry Ford. For 3 frozen seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Lily shot out of bed, tangled in sheets, and nearly fell to the floor. "What are you doing in my room?" she demanded. Henry's voice was flat. "Your room? This is my room." It was then she noticed the tailored suit on the chair, the unfamiliar curtains, and the unmistakable scent of his cologne. Her heart dropped. "Oh, no." "Oh, yes," Henry replied, arms crossed. Panic surged through her. "I didn't do this on purpose." "I figured. Otherwise, I'd have called security." The conversation might have ended there, but a knock on the door made her blood run cold. "Mr. Ford, have you seen Lily?" a woman's voice asked from outside. Henry's eyes narrowed. "Hide." Without thinking, Lily dove under the bed just as he opened the door to greet Natalie, a colleague. Natalie chatted briefly, suspicious about Lily's absence, but eventually left. Lily crawled out, humiliated. "This never happened," she muttered, gathering her shoes. Henry gave her one last look. "If you plan to walk into the wrong room again tonight, at least knock first." Her mouth fell open. "Are you joking?" He didn't answer, just smirked. She stormed out, determined to forget the night, but deep down, she knew she wouldn't. Lily spent the morning avoiding Henry like he was a live grenade. Her plan was simple: get to her own room, pretend nothing had happened, and pray the universe erased the memory. Unfortunately, the universe had other ideas. As she slipped into the breakfast hall, she nearly collided with Natalie. "There you are," Natalie exclaimed, scanning her up and down. "Where were you last night? You disappeared after dinner." Lily forced a smile. "I slept." Natalie's sharp eyes narrowed. "Really? Your hair is a mess, your clothes are wrinkled, and you look like you saw a ghost." Lily laughed awkwardly. "Rough night, bad pillow." Natalie folded her arms. "I went to Henry's room earlier. He seemed off. Don't tell me." "What? No," Lily blurted, a little too quickly. "Absolutely not." Natalie studied her for another second before shrugging. Fine. Let's eat. Lily sat at the table, willing herself not to look at Henry. Of course, that only made it worse, because every time she did glance up, his eyes were already on her. Not angry, not even annoyed, amused. By the time the morning conference began, she had convinced herself he would act completely professional. And he did, for the most part. But when the meeting broke for coffee, Henry approached her, hands in his pockets, voice low. "Do you know what the investors are saying?" he asked. Lily frowned. "No. What?" "They think we spent the night together." Her stomach dropped. "What? How?" "Someone saw you leaving my room this morning," he said calmly, as though discussing the weather. "Apparently it's become an interesting topic." She stared at him. "We need to fix this." Henry's lips curved slightly. "Actually, we don't." Lily blinked. "Excuse me?" "The Callahans," he explained, referring to their most important clients. "Value, trust, and stability in business partners. Now they think we're in a relationship. It's working in our favor." "That's ridiculous." "Maybe," he said, leaning closer. "But it's true. Which is why I want you to do something for me." Her eyes narrowed. "What?" "Pretend to be my girlfriend. For the rest of the trip." Lily stared at him like he'd just asked her to rob a bank. "You're insane." He didn't flinch. "You want the deal to go through, don't you?" Her pulse kicked up. This was madness. But she knew he was right. Ford Enterprises needed this contract, and if pretending to like him for a few days could help, she couldn't exactly refuse. "If I do this," she said slowly, "no one can ever know about this morning." His smile deepened. "Agreed." Against every ounce of her better judgment, she nodded. "Fine." "Perfect," he said, as if he'd just sealed another $1 million deal. As she walked away, she caught herself muttering, "What have I gotten myself into?" She had no idea this arrangement was about to change everything. By evening, the plan was in motion. Henry insisted they treat it like a performance, one that had to be flawless. "We need rules," he said, leaning casually against the doorway to her hotel room. "First, you have to look comfortable around me. Smiles, no eye rolling." She crossed her arms. "Easy for you to say. You're not pretending to like someone who treats you like a robot at work." A glint of humor flickered in his eyes. "Second, there has to be subtle physical contact, nothing over the top. A hand on the arm, a touch on the shoulder, enough to look natural." Lily groaned. "I can barely look at you without remembering that I woke up next to you this morning." Henry smirked. "That's why we're practicing now. Better to fail here than in front of the investors." By the time the cocktail party rolled around, Lily was dressed in an elegant sapphire blue dress, telling herself this was purely business. She stepped into the hallway and stopped. Henry was waiting for her, dressed in a tailored black suit, his hair perfectly in place. "You look—" His pause was brief, but his eyes said more than his words. "Ready." When they entered the lounge together, conversation seemed to shift toward them. Lily forced a smile, feeling the weight of every gaze. One of the Callahans approached, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a warm handshake. "So it's true then?" he asked, eyes twinkling. "You two are together?" Before Lily could stammer out a reply, Henry slipped an arm lightly around her waist. "Yes," he said with complete ease. Lily's pulse stumbled. She managed a laugh. "Unexpected, but it's been great." The man grinned. "That only strengthens our confidence in your partnership." As they moved away from the group, Lily hissed under her breath, "How do you make this look so easy?" "The trick," Henry murmured, "is not to overthink it." She didn't reply, because the warmth of his hand on her waist was distracting her far too much. The rest of the evening blurred into a careful dance of conversation and calculated touches. Once, while speaking to two investors, Henry's fingers brushed hers so casually it could have been an accident. But when she looked at him, his eyes held hers just a beat too long. It was a game, and Henry Ford played to win. But if he thought she was just a pawn, he was wrong. Halfway through the night, she decided to test him. When they sat down together, she let her knee graze his under the table, just lightly enough that it could be dismissed as nothing. Henry froze for half a second. Then, without breaking eye contact with the man speaking to them, he shifted closer, his leg pressing back against hers in a silent challenge. Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks. This wasn't part of the plan. Or maybe it was, his plan. As the party drew to a close, they stepped out into the resort's garden. The air was cooler now, the sound of waves in the distance. Henry stopped walking, turning to face her. "You like a challenge, don't you?" he asked quietly. She crossed her arms. "Don't think you know me that well." "I know enough." His voice dropped lower, his gaze flicking briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. Her breath caught. "Good night, Lily," he said, and walked away, leaving her standing in the moonlight with her heart racing. The next morning should have been simple: final contract negotiations, smiles for the investors, and then home. But the moment Lily stepped into the conference room, she knew nothing about this would be simple anymore. Henry was already there, speaking with Charles Callahan. He looked exactly as he always did, tailored suit, polished demeanor, but when his eyes found hers, the corner of his mouth tilted in the faintest smile. It wasn't the kind of smile you gave a colleague. She took her seat beside him, determined to focus on the meeting. But every so often, his shoulder would brush hers, or his hand would rest lightly on the table between them, close enough that her fingers itched to touch it. During the coffee break, Charles approached with a grin. "I have to say, you two make balancing work and a relationship look effortless." Lily forced a polite smile. "It's a challenge, but we manage." Henry's voice was smooth, unhurried. "Lily is an exceptional professional. Working with her while sharing something personal has been enlightening." Lily's breath hitched when, mid-sentence, Henry placed a hand at the small of her back, so subtly no one else would notice. It was a silent message. "I'm still in control of this game." She decided it was time to turn the tables. At lunch, seated across from Charles and a group of investors, Lily waited until the conversation was in full swing. Then she rested her hand on Henry's arm, fingers lightly tracing the fabric of his suit. Henry's fork paused mid-air. For the first time since this started, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise. Her lips curved. "Got you." But Henry Ford was not a man who stayed on the defensive for long. When they stood to leave, he placed his hand at her waist, holding her just a second too long before stepping back. The tension between them was no longer an act. Later, Lily retreated to the pool, determined to reclaim a moment of peace. She was stretched out on a lounge chair, book in hand, when a shadow blocked the sun. Henry stood there, suit jacket over one arm, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "Taking a break?" he asked. "Is that allowed?" she said evenly. "Or is it part of your plan to keep me off balance?" He chuckled softly, an unexpected sound from him. "Looks like you finally understand the rules. And it looks like you don't like it when someone plays better than you," she countered. He sat beside her, loosening his tie. "I have to admit, I'm surprised. That I'm not predictable? That you're enjoying this as much as I am?" Before she could answer, Natalie appeared, announcing that dinner had been moved up. Lily stood, but Henry's gaze lingered on her for just a beat too long, as though silently daring her to admit the truth neither of them was saying out loud. That night, as she dressed for dinner in a sleek black gown, she reminded herself it was still just business. But the moment she saw Henry waiting in the hallway, all dark suit and quiet confidence, she knew she was lying to herself. When he offered his arm, she took it without hesitation. Inside the dining room, investors smiled at them as if they'd always belonged together. And maybe, Lily thought as Henry's hand brushed hers under the table, the line between pretending and feeling had already been crossed. Dinner was a polished affair. Crystal glasses, candlelight, and the low hum of polite conversation. Henry sat beside her, perfectly composed, his deep voice weaving effortlessly into business talk with the Callahans. But to Lily, every moment felt like a silent tug of war. At one point, his hand brushed hers beneath the table. It could have been accidental, but the slight curl of his fingers against her knuckles told her it wasn't. She glanced at him. His expression never changed, but his eyes, they were watching her, waiting. Halfway through the meal, Charles Callahan raised his glass. "It's refreshing," he said warmly, "to see a couple so in sync, both personally and professionally. It gives me confidence this partnership will last." Lily forced a smile, but her pulse thudded in her ears. This wasn't just about business anymore. After the final toast, she excused herself, stepping out onto the balcony to escape the heat building in her chest. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of the ocean. She leaned on the railing, taking a deep breath. "You're sneaking away from the celebration," Henry's voice said from behind her. She didn't turn. Just needed air. Footsteps approached until he was standing beside her. "You've been avoiding me all night." "I've been keeping this professional," she corrected. Henry's head tilted slightly. "That's interesting, considering you've been thinking about this." His gaze flicked to her lips. "Since the cocktail party." Her breath caught. "Don't flatter yourself." He leaned closer, his voice a low challenge. "Tell me you haven't thought about it, and I'll stop." Lily's pulse raced. She should have walked away. Instead, she looked up at him and saw something different in his expression. The practiced confidence was still there, but beneath it, something unguarded. "I can't," she admitted, the word barely a whisper. Henry didn't hesitate. His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek, and then his mouth was on her. The kiss was slow but intense, pulling her in like a current she couldn't fight. She gripped his lapel, holding him close, her heart hammering in her chest. For the first time, there was nothing calculated about his touch, no audience, no act. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unevenly, she took a shaky step back. This wasn't part of the plan. Henry's eyes stayed on hers. "Maybe not, but I'm not ready to pretend it didn't happen." She looked away, trying to steady her thoughts. "We need to think this through." He gave a small nod, but the glimmer in his eyes said he had no intention of letting her slip away. That night, she avoided him at the farewell dinner, sitting with Natalie and focusing on small talk. But when she returned to her room hours later, there was a knock at the door. Henry stood there, sleeves rolled up, no tie, the cool businessman stripped away. "You can't run forever, Lily." "I'm not running," she said quietly. "Yes, you are. You feel the same way I do. You're just afraid to admit it." Her defenses wavered. "Give me a chance," he said, his voice softer now. After a long pause, she exhaled. "One chance." The way his mouth curved told her he'd already decided one chance would never be enough. The next morning, Lily woke up with a knot in her chest, but it wasn't fear this time. She'd given Henry a chance, and that single decision felt like a door swinging open to something she couldn't quite define. Their flight home wasn't until the afternoon, but Henry's text came early. "Meet me in the lobby in 30 minutes, brunch with the Callahans." When she arrived, he was leaning casually against an armchair, gray suit flawless, phone in hand. But when he looked up and saw her, his eyes softened in a way that made her heart skip. "Ready?" he asked simply. At brunch, Henry kept things strictly business for the table's benefit. Yet between the polite conversation and clinking glasses, Lily caught the subtle glances he sent her way, the ones meant for no one else. It was maddening, thrilling, and utterly impossible to ignore. Back at the resort, he walked her to the elevator. "You didn't say anything about last night," she said, trying to sound casual. "You asked for time to think," he replied. "I'm respecting that." She frowned. "It's frustrating." His lips tilted in a knowing half-smile. "Why?" "Because I expected you to try to convince me." "You're already convinced, Lily," he said quietly. "You just don't want to admit it." The elevator doors opened and he stepped back. "I'll wait for your answer." That night, she found her answer. She was sitting at the hotel bar with Natalie when Henry walked in. He didn't look toward her at first, but she felt the shift in the air the moment he did. Without another word to Natalie, Lily crossed the room. Henry set down his glass as she stopped in front of him. "Waiting for my answer?" she asked. "Yes." "I don't want this to end," she said. For a moment, something unguarded flashed in his eyes. Then he stood, closing the distance between them. "Now you finally understand." "Understand what?" "That this was never just a game." Before she could speak, his hand was on her cheek and his lips were on hers. This kiss was nothing like the one on the balcony. It was deeper, certain, as though both of them had been holding back for far too long. When they broke apart, breathless, she could barely form words. "This is risky," she managed. "Everything worth having is," Henry replied. They left the bar together, walking the quiet path toward the beach. The night sky was velvet black, dotted with stars, the waves rolling softly onto the shore. "If we do this," Lily said, "there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," Henry said simply. "And what about work?" He tilted her chin until she met his eyes. "If I'm willing to take the risk, are you?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." Henry smiled, not his usual controlled, polite smile, but something warmer, almost relieved. "Then we're in this together." When he kissed her again, the ocean's rhythm seemed to match the thundering of her heartbeat. There was no audience now, no deal to close, no roles to play. For the first time, it was just them. The morning after the beach, they parted to their own rooms, but something had shifted between them. The air felt charged, their steps lighter, their glances harder to hide. By the time they boarded the plane back to the city, Henry didn't bother with distance. He took the seat beside her, offering quiet conversation and the occasional brush of his hand against hers. No one else seemed to notice, but Lily felt every touch like a secret only they shared. Back at the office, reality came rushing back. Meetings, deadlines, endless phone calls. In front of the team, Henry was all business again, his familiar mask firmly in place. But behind closed doors, there were glances that lingered too long, voices that softened when no one else was around. One evening, long after the building had emptied, Henry stepped into her office. "We survived the first day," he said with a faint smile. "At this rate, no one will ever suspect," she replied. His head tilted slightly. "Do you want no one to suspect?" She hesitated. "I'm not sure yet." "I can wait," he said simply, but his tone made it clear. He wouldn't wait forever. A week later, she found herself inviting him into her apartment for the first time. The night unfolded in laughter, soft kisses, and conversations that stretched past midnight. By morning, she woke to the smell of coffee and the sight of Henry in her kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled, hair slightly tousled. It was disarming, human, and far more intimate than anything they'd done before. "This feels strange," she admitted, accepting the cup he handed her. "Does it bother you?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, it surprises me." "Then get used to it," he said. And she realized she wanted to. Weeks turned into months. Their relationship stayed quiet at work, but outside the office they built something real. Weekend getaways, quiet dinners, moments that felt like their own little world. Then, one ordinary evening on her couch, Henry surprised her. "You never thought we'd end up like this, did you?" he asked. "Not even close," she laughed. "You were my cold, impossible boss." "And you were my stubborn assistant who never listened," he countered, his eyes softening. Then, with no warning, he dropped to one knee. Lily's breath caught. "Henry," he held up a small, slightly crooked ring. "I could have bought the perfect diamond," he said, "but I wanted something no one else in the world could have, just like you." Tears pricked her eyes. "It's terrible," she teased, "but I love it." "So is that a yes?" "It's a yes, you crazy man." The wedding was intimate, set in a vineyard under strings of warm lights. As she walked toward him, Henry's eyes never left hers. Their vows were equal parts heartfelt and playful, a perfect reflection of how far they'd come from that morning in the wrong room. "You look beautiful," he whispered when she reached him. And you, she said with a smile, look like a man who finally lost control and liked it. The officiant declared them husband and wife, and Henry kissed her as though the rest of the world had fallen away. Lily pulled back just enough to whisper, "So, best deal you ever made?" He smiled, fingers laced with hers. "Without question." And just like that, the game was over. What they had now wasn't pretend, it wasn't strategy, it was forever.